We want to go over the updates with you, tell you the decisions that we've made, talk with you about some things we need help with this morning, and then go into small group breakouts so that we'll give you, I believe, 3 topics that we would like your input on, and then we'll come back together to share out and take questions at the end. When Maggie Dangerfield joins us, she's going to help facilitate the breakout sessions. So that's the agenda we had in mind for today's meeting. Next slide, Jeff. We show you, this slide is on our website right now. So our current plan on the left-hand side, we intended to sort of show the decisions that are ready to recommend to the board or that have been made. So on the left-hand side, we indicate the school start date is tentatively August 18th. On the right-hand side, for further discussion, is whether August 18th is the best date given the conditions that we're currently facing in our community with the rate of spread of the infection, or whether it would be wiser to delay 2 weeks. So that's one of the things that the groups will be discussing this morning. We know that we're going to offer face-to-face instruction at all of our schools. Some of our schools can get 100% of their students back. That's what Jamie McCarthy and I were talking about. If you happen to overhear us a little before 10 o'clock this morning at Jamie's school, she believes she can get 100% of her students back if we can work out the transportation challenges. Other schools are at capacity and may not be able to bring every student back every day, may have to do some version of an AB schedule. Carolyn Belcher will talk about that a bit for us today. Then we move down to the providing a full-time virtual school, which we will do for parents who are not comfortable with their students coming back. And then Jeff Barowie will talk this morning about the decisions we've made and are putting in place regarding sanitization and the way that we can safely partition students in areas where we can't locate desks 6 feet apart. This would be a good time for me to say we intend to follow the CDC guidance that was in place earlier this week. We don't know what might happen in terms of the recommendations, but we're still going to listen to medical experts who at this time are still recommending either a 6 feet of distance between students or some sort of partitions. On the right-hand side, we still have to work on, as I've mentioned, the start date. We are not sure exactly how to work on that alternate scheduling if in schools that have to go AB days. We haven't nailed down exactly how much, what type of protective equipment that teachers should wear. We're pretty firm on where we stand with student face masks, but we will continue to monitor that given the information that we're learning about air quality. We now know the school meals could be moved to the left-hand column, that students will, for the most part, take meals in the classroom. And we still need to make some decisions about COVID-19 testing. So if we move on to the next slide, we're going to talk just a minute about school start date. The bottom 2 points on that slide show August 11th as the start date for teachers. We're firm on that. We know that our teachers can come back safely on August 11th. They can receive the professional development. They can learn about the improvements we've made over the summer with respect to the way we schedule and deliver any online learning, that if we need to go into that mode with all of our children. We have a new math curriculum we're putting in place, and they have some work to do in their classrooms. So we know that our teachers can start back August 11th. We're uncertain whether August 18th is still the best date for students. We would have to see a downward trend in the COVID-19 infection rates. And to talk a little bit more about the collaboration that our district is so fortunate to have with DHEC and MUSC, I'd like to invite first Dr. Richardson from DHEC to share any information she thinks would be important for this group to hear. And then following Dr. Richardson, Dr. O'Brien from MUSC. So, Katie?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being included in this committee. I've learned a lot, and I've really come to appreciate even more so than I did before all the thoughtfulness and care put in by everyone in the district as well as the school communities to helping to ensure that staff and students are able to come back safely to school. Even before the COVID epidemic, we were working closely at DHEC, especially in the Low Country region, with the nursing staff at Charleston County School District. We have had outbreaks before, and we have worked closely, and Ellen certainly knows that she's able to reach out to me anytime, day or night, weekdays or weekends. We're very appreciative that the school nurses assisted DHEC in some of our early efforts in contact tracing, which we know is so important. And they are now able to use those skills as well as additional skills that we can provide, that they can form their own in-house strike team, or from the time that teachers come back, and then certainly when students are also back, to help provide education and guidance to the community to ensure that cases are investigated and correct procedures are put in place to help prevent that transmission at schools. And we will continue to work with them on that. Certainly DHEC will be there to support and offer any additional resources as needed. We'll continue to share guidance as we have been doing, and Ella and I talk several times a week as things continue to evolve, but I believe that the school district is as prepared as any that I have heard of nationwide to make decisions based on good evidence. And so, you know, I appreciate the district's help and everyone's help on this call and making sure that we continue to get out those prevention messages. And as the superintendent said, we want to see that downward trend. And at this point, the most important things for making that happen are the same prevention strategies we've been talking about from the beginning: wearing masks, social distancing, hand hygiene, and when students come back to school, keeping kids home who are sick. And now, you know, obviously doing that ourselves as much as possible. So I am here, and I'm happy to take questions as we come along, but you are in good hands with Ellen and Jeff and the whole team of the district. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. Dr. O'Brien, we would appreciate it if you would talk about some of the efforts underway with MUSC.
Sure. So the majority of our efforts have been focused on our Back to Business program and or Back to School program, we'll call it. So we've actually had our nurse liaisons out at several of the sites. We're conducting our pilot walkthroughs right now at the 4 sites we're going to. I can't remember off the top of my head, I apologize, but everyone's been really receptive and really helpful. And I'd like to also applaud the district for, we were able to go and see the site where you're fabricating some of the dividers that will go on some of the student desks and some of the you know, kind of more hardwired infrastructure things that you guys are developing, which looks really, really, really good. Actually, we're taking some of those recommendations out into industry to kind of help them out too. So well done there. And so we are doing our initial walkthrough pilot evaluations, making recommendations, coming up with an entire playbook for the school system. And that'll be something that we will be able to edit along the way. We, of course, work with DHEC regulations, CDC, and everybody else on those kind of playbooks. The second thing is, as you may have seen yesterday in the, I believe, actually you were on the press conference yesterday, the Zoom press conference, there is a good bit of local data that we're compiling in MUSC to come up with a 4-pronged risk stratification, color-coded, I don't want to call it risk stratification, but kind of a warning system of how things are going locally. So that will also be available, and I think will help inform the decisions of this council moving forward. Thank
you, Dr. O'Brien. Are are you envisioning a sort of back to school playbook or auditing system almost that we could use to create a checklist that every school could use, and perhaps schools in other districts could use as well? We've connected with Horry, Georgetown, Berkeley, Dorchester 2, Dorchester 4, Colleton, and Beaufort, all of whom would like to share whatever back to school planning, audit, certification effort is developed. Do you think that that is a feasible aspiration?
I do. I think each one will be. We're definitely coming up with the big playbook. Yes, and each one will be individually tailored to certain unique needs of each school, because as you know, each school is slightly different. So we are working on that. But yes, I think the general playbook certainly can be shared. Now, what we want the schools to do is continue with the liaisons, though, so that when changes happen, we'll be able to kind of inform those changes.
Thank you. That's extremely helpful. Does anyone on the call have any specific questions for Dr. Richardson with DHEC or Dr. O'Brien at this point in time? Okay, thank you. I think we'll go ahead now and move back to the PowerPoint slides, if you will, Jeff. What we wanted to just emphasize on this slide still is that we will depend on the science. We will rely on data, on science, on advice from medical experts as we make decisions about how to enact a safe school restart. I'm sure probably everyone on this call has seen the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations. If not, we've put a live link here and we'll provide that to you. And again, I will just iterate for those who joined the call late. August 11th is the definite start back date for teachers. We've not changed our August 18th tentative comeback date for students, but we would have to see a downward trend in the COVID-19 rates that looks as though it's sustainable and will continue to flatten that curve significantly before we would move forward. On the next slide, we simply show the results that we've received so far of parent surveys. And I will quickly say we have about a little over 40% of our parents who responded really quickly. So over 20,000 parents responded. When we got their responses, we realized that they're probably part of a skewed group, because the parents who haven't responded are likely not those who are checking email regularly or who are overwhelmed with emails or who don't have connectivity. So we admit these results are skewed. We're not saying that they can be generalized across the population, but the majority of the parents want an in-person sort of instruction. If you look toward the bottom of that slide, the third bullet up, 53% want the everyday, 33% want some sort of hybrid, on one day, off one day, or some sort of model where their children are in school part of the time, but they're not quite ready to risk exposure all of the time. And then we have, at this point in time, 14%, we'll say less than 20% with the additional interest we've had since this survey was completed, of enrollment in our K-12 virtual school, which Carolyn Belcher will talk about a little bit more in a moment. We said last time that the bus transportation capacity is sort of the central cog in a lot of our effort to bring children back. Jeff will say a little bit more about that, but of those responding, about half of them said they want to ride the bus. We speculate that more children from families that didn't respond will want to ride the bus. So our principals are going to have to go child by child, household by household, to get down to the nitty-gritty on who wants to come back to school and who doesn't. Who wants to ride the bus and who doesn't, so that we can get these. We're going to have to get finite numbers, school by school, for 78 sites, and then about 6 additional programs that don't run, don't have a site enrollment. On to the next slide then. I'm going to turn it over to Carolyn Belter to talk quickly about learning services. We're trying to talk fast this morning, so you'll have time in the breakout sessions. Carolyn?
And fortunately, I can do that since I'm from Massachusetts. So I think the headline here is I was lucky enough to have some time to go on vacation last week. And when I went on vacation, everything changed. Sadly, the viral load switched in the district. And we thought we were planning for starting early. We were planning for in-person summer semester program, and that just wasn't possible. So as someone who's an educator and deeply values a tight plan, this has been painful that we're changing so quickly. But I think this is just our new reality. And I think one of the things I would ask for community members listening, educators, is that we are trying to make sure that we have multiple options, but recognizing that things are going to shift in real time, and let's make sure that we can accommodate it in real time too. So at the headline, I want to make sure I reinforce, like, we all want kids come back to school as much as possible, and the principals have done incredible work, as Dr. Polsterwaite alluded to make sure that we can maximize our physical space to have as many kids as possible back in the building safely. But in some of our buildings where we're at capacity or close to it, it's going to be impossible for us to do that and still maintain social distancing. So we're going to have to look into hybrid schedules. We talked about these at the high level last time we met. Nationally, there are essentially 3 big options that are out there. I'm not seeing other school districts take anything beyond the options I'm going to talk through right now. One is an A-B rotation. As the name implies, it would mean that on Mondays and probably Thursdays, one group of students comes into the classroom for face-to-face instruction, and then on Tuesdays and Fridays, that group of students is at home learning through extension activities and some of our online adaptive digital content. And then alternative, obviously, if your family is in a B schedule, they would be to school on Tuesdays and Fridays. Now, Wednesday would be a day where we would use it to rotate between the A and the B group to make sure that we're maximizing instructional time. Alternatively, sort of similarly, it's sort of 2 days in a row. The upside of that is it allows for a little more time for cleaning. I think we're in a good place in Charleston County that that's not necessarily a limiting factor. It also allows 2 days of cohesive instruction face-to-face, which may be preferable for some grade levels. And then alternating weeks where you're on for a full week of instruction face-to-face with a teacher, and then at home for a full week, and then obviously alternating. There are strengths and weaknesses to all of them, both obviously from a family perspective who has to plan for childcare on those days where students are not on board, or not in face-to-face instruction, and for the teachers. It's a lot to balance to have your course split into 2 groups of students. You're obviously teaching the same lesson twice, but to actually monitor individual student progress, that's a heavy lift. I think right now we are leaning towards the first one, A-B, from an educator perspective, only because that's a lot of what's happening in surrounding communities and districts. So it allows us to be more cohesive, and particularly for our youngest students who we're most worried about in this difficult time, it allows more frequent face-to-face contact with their teacher. Our second option, if for parents who are feeling like they want to keep their children at home for whatever reason, whether it's vulnerability in health or wanting to make sure that they can monitor this more closely themselves, we're going to offer a K-12 virtual academy. The way that that's going to work does not preclude students who are in magnet or school choice programs from losing their positions. It will be a fully virtual program. We're going to run it like a program school, which means that the home school would remain their school right now, but all instruction would happen through the virtual academy. Now, this is an important distinction. This means that students are taking part in courses with other students who enrolled in the virtual academy. We are going to hire a team of educators to work with and teach those courses. We're looking first to our teachers. Obviously, we hope that this is an option for those teachers who are medically vulnerable, but our headline here is that can't be a selection criteria. We're going to hire the best teachers possible that are a good match for the virtual environment. And the idea is it would be a bit more structured than what you would have experienced in the spring. So there will be time where content is taught, say 30 minutes of a teacher working through video conferencing like this with a group of students, and then some time for them to have extension, and then another class. We are purchasing this content from some of the most widely recognized online providers, particularly Florida Virtual, Edgenuity. We're using the South Carolina Virtual, and we are building some of our own classes. I will say I always prefer face-to-face instruction. I think CCSD is going to do a good job on that. But if a family has to make a decision around health and safety, this will be a viable option. And we're working to try to, I know that our initial communications on this said we're asking for a year-long commitment. We are sure that we can say a nice on-ramp and off-ramp after a semester. So want to make sure that we're trying to be as flexible as we can. But the constraint here is we want to make sure that there's a natural place to transition academics for students so that we have a full quarter or semester of grades that can matter for kids. So that's the reason why it's helpful to know that someone's going to commit. And then finally, for all of our students, it's going to be critically important that we assess where they are. We've had a significant gap. The concerns are all over everywhere around what does that mean for our kids, particularly for our kids who are already academically vulnerable. And so we're going to be using similar tests to what we've used in the past in terms of the MAP in math and ELA that will happen in those initial weeks for both virtually enrolled students in the virtual academy as well as in the traditional instruction, and FastBridge. So those are the two assessments we'll use to get a sense of where kids are performing. And then I think on the highlight, our job will be, the real challenge of this next year is going to be to accelerate instruction. So to make sure that we're not only shoring up what didn't happen at the end of last year, but that we're making sure that kids are getting exposed to sufficient grade level content. I'm excited about some of the work that the curriculum instruction team is doing to videotape the initial 20 lessons in our phonics program and in our Bridges math program, so that teachers will be able to use some of the best of their colleagues' work as a starting point. We won't have to reinvent the wheel, and then they can really focus on the individual needs of their kids. And we're also doing a lot of work with the standards to make sure that we're explicit with educators on what we want to cover this year, because we're going to have to make some hard choices and prioritize, and where they should have learned something in the fourth quarter of last year and didn't. Where are we going to create those connections real time so that they can grasp the new content and aren't held back because they missed that fourth quarter of instruction? So there's a tremendous amount of work to do instructionally, and we're very fortunate the operations team has set us up well to maximize our physical space and have as many kids in safely as we can. Dr. Pulsar, I don't know if you want me to pause for questions or just turn it over to Jeff to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about those operational concerns.
I think we probably need to go on to Jeff, because this will be one of the discussion questions for people to talk about in the breakouts. Okay?
All right. Speaking of a lot of work to do, so I've got a few slides here, and the intent of the slides I'm showing today are, number one, to talk about some of the items that we are looking to implement. We believe these items are in alignment with the guidance that we've received so far from higher related to, especially from the Accelerate Ed and from DHEC. Our goal is to make sure we meet the minimum of that and go above and beyond where we believe it adds significant value. And a tough part to decide related to that is the cost of things that are implemented. And so I wanted to share the numbers on the cost, because I frequently get questions of why can't you do more? It would helpful, can we clean this more? Can we do this more? And certainly it could, but we really have to take a hard look at the benefit versus that cost, and could the money be spent better elsewhere to improve safety for our students and our faculty. The first one that I want to talk about is the physical distancing designs being implemented in our schools. And this has really been a game changer. I've listed there that it's increased our capacity, our 6-foot spacing capacity by more than 40%. I would probably say in some schools even more than that. Obviously some a little bit less, which is why I put 40 here. We've really got a pretty good system teed up and ready to execute. And that begins with aligning the classroom desks in all of the schools to see what numbers we can get and ensuring that our designs are practical for the type of furniture in those classrooms. We've now, as of this second, because I just checked the list, we've done 23 schools as far as the layouts go. And as pointed out earlier, we've done pretty well with capacity. In fact, of those 23 schools, we believe that 18 of them can carry their current school load from their current enrollment school load from an enrollment perspective. And what we'll do at this point is when we get those in place and the schools are comfortable with the layouts, we'll begin to proceed with execution of the construction. And you can see my estimate for installation across the district is $1.5 million to make that happen. We've got an order right now, 15,000 sheets of 4x8 plexiglass. And plexiglass is the name that we all use. It is really a polycarbonate that we're using that has been approved by the fire marshals and by the Office of School Facilities, which I know folks concerned about flammability would want to know that. In the pictures, you can see a typical elementary school design on the lower left with a pod system for students in a pod. And you can see there's 6 of them there, so a capacity of 24. And we probably could add a couple more if necessary on a side table. And on the far right is your traditional high school, in some cases middle school classroom desk, in which an L-shaped divider is actually mounted to that desk and would allow that desk to be closer to the desk to the upper left of where this one is at. One of the key messages also is that not all classrooms need dividers. We have some schools that had plenty of enrollment before, plenty of capacity before, and partitions may not be needed because of the class size and the size of that classroom. So we're focused on putting them where we need them the most, starting with elementary schools and working our way up to middle and high schools. This is a list of measures that we're ready to enact that we believe meet our minimum needs at this point. As I mentioned before, you can see the dollar figures next to those. Some of them are rather staggering. And you might say, well, does it really cost that much? Bus disinfection? It's only $3.50 a bus cleaning. If you're going to do that twice a day, times 400 buses, times 180 days a year, that's how you get the $506,800 price tag that goes with that. We're looking at disinfecting our bathrooms and common touch surfaces twice a day. That requires additional day porter custodial hours to meet that need. And then once a week, we're looking at disinfecting schools with our power foggers using a hydrogen peroxide solution that we've actually used for years and years in our high school locker rooms for other issues. But now it folds in well, but we need to buy additional machines and the supplies that go with that. That would allow us to do each school once a week, 20% a night, to allow that what we'll call deep cleaning of those spaces. In the center of the slide, from an HVAC perspective, I get a lot of questions about what kind of air. These kids are going to be breathing the same air. They're really not. I challenged some elementary teachers yesterday by saying, if any of you have a fresh air equipment, piece of equipment in your homes, you get my retirement. Nobody has fresh air equipment in their homes. We have it in our schools. And that allows for a replacement of air multiple times during the day. We have a need to upgrade some of those systems. And we also want to upgrade our filters. We keep the next lower level filters in our schools to ensure that our utility costs remain reasonable and that also we don't put extra wear and tear on the equipment, but we want to upgrade those filters to increase the likelihood of catching viruses. Water fill bottles, we only have our water fill stations. We had 17 schools that didn't have them. We want to make sure each school has a hands-free water bottle filler. And we've got some upgrades to our nursing stations and a number of nurses in our schools to make sure we're covered as well. Part of the discussion, small group discussion, we'll talk about PPE and we'll talk about COVID testing. I wanted to give the entire group just a very quick overview. It appears, at least the direction we're heading now, is that we would have face coverings for both faculty and students until the 6-foot spacing requirement is met. We have a cloth issue ready for the faculty. We're standing at the ready to order cloth masks for the students. There would be some exceptions to that. Our special needs classes, children and adults that for respiratory issues can't wear cloth masks, and we would move toward the face shield. The face shield topic is something that probably comes up every single day. Teachers want to use them in lieu of face coverings. I would love to let them use them in lieu of face coverings. Until I have one of those medical experts out there tell me that we can use that within 6 feet without a mask, I'm standing at the ready to buy them, and the teachers want them. That's one thing that we continue to look at, that we would love to move in that direction on. But we've had different input on this topic. We've had a number of parents have said we don't want the students wearing face coverings. We've got obviously teachers that are concerned with children not being able to see their mouth movements and forming words, and helping with the transfer of information to the students. That'll be part of the discussion. And lastly, COVID testing. We've taken a lot of input on that. At this point, we're leaning toward making it highly recommended for staff and possibly students as they come back in. The con to that is the test is only as good as the day you take it. However, it sure would be nice to screen out people coming into the school on day one that would bring something into the school. It would help from that perspective. We've gotten some incredible help so far from both Feder and MUSC with testing, offering testing days. We've had them at multiple school sites, and that's worked out very well for us and the community. And lastly, we're also researching the swab test rather than intrusive PCR test for our students to make it a lot easier, and that's something that we continue to research. All right, Dr. Postlewaite, I think we're moving toward the small groups, unless you do want to open it for questions before that.
Dr. Postlewaite, we can't hear you.
You're muted, Dr. Postlewaite.
Well, yes, there was just this big sign on my screen as well saying to unmute myself. Maggie, I was just saying, I think we probably should go into the small group discussion where critical questions could be posed. If we start taking large group questions now, we may end up shortchanging the group on time for actual input. So Maggie, I'm turning it over to you to review the main topics and explain how the breakout groups will work.
Okay, wonderful. So we're going to do a little bit of small group discussion for the next 15 minutes centered around the 3 questions or topics on your screen, predominantly the school start date, COVID testing and PPE for students and staff, and the different instructional models, the hybrid schedule specifically, alternating AB or AABB, or alternating weeks. Everybody's been randomly assigned. We have 3 groups with about 12 participants in each, including some district individuals in each group who are there to listen. And so if you'll take the next 15 minutes to talk about that, make sure that's good with time. And then select a non-district spokesperson from the group to share out when we return. We'll have about 3 minutes for each group to share out their thoughts on each of the 3 areas. And we'll go from there. So.
Thanks, Maggie. Just to clarify on the 3 questions, they won't be able to see this slide in their breakout groups, will they, Maggie?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so you may want to just jot down. The questions are what we're trying to decide now is whether to keep the student start date August 18th or announce soon after our board meets on July 20th. Recommend to our board that we delay the student start until August 31st, unless we see a downward trend between now and July 20, which is seems impossible. But anyway, that's the question. And if we do that, then we just want to point out this should not be part of our decision making, but it does mean that our elementary children would likely not get out of school. We would run through next June as a result of having added 5 days and then starting 2 weeks late. It adds 3 weeks on the school year, which means it would be the end of June, and no problem. We just want people to understand that going in. Then the second question, do you think COVID—
Well, Dr. Postaway, can I ask a really quick question about bullet 1?
Yes.
As it relates to the 180 days that are required, does the Department of Education recognize a virtual school day as a part of that 180 days? Or does it have to be in person?
It can be virtual.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, and under 2 circumstances, but Charleston qualifies for both of them, so I'll not go into those details. So that's not universal across the state, but for Charleston County, a virtual day counts as one of the 180, or for K-8, 185 days that we'll have this year. Should we just highly recommend or try to require one COVID-19 test that comes back negative for all of our staff before they start back? And then the type of PPE that you think would be appropriate for staff and students. Right now we're asking students to wear masks from the time they get on the bus till they're at their assigned seat. Put the mask back on when they get off the bus. We're asking students to wear masks from the time they step foot onto school property and come in that front entryway until they get to their seat, sit down, and then they may take the mask off when they're behind the partition or 6 feet distanced. If they go out of the room to go to the restroom or into the hallway, they would need to put the mask on. They get up to get something in the room, they need to put their mask on. And then the hybrid schedule Carolyn has talked about, how would we work out what's better for those on the call regarding the scheduling of an on day and an off day, or an on week or an off week, that sort of thing. So thanks, Maggie. Are you ready to create the breakout rooms now?
Yes, ma'am. In just a minute, you'll have an invitation that pops up on your screen to join one of the breakout rooms. And then as we're approaching the 15-minute mark, I'll automatically close them, and you'll get a notice that your room will be closing in 60 seconds to rejoin the main session. So I'm going to open them now, and y'all can go ahead and go in.
I don't know what went wrong with the invitation this morning. I have no idea.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just started the timer. I don't know. I don't know either. The reminder invitation we sent. So I don't know.
Should we pause recording for a moment?
Yeah, that's fine. Oh.
Dr. Postaway, I think there's a button at the top of your screen that may enable you to pause recording. maybe.
Back live.
All right, it looks like everyone is back together now. Hope the breakout groups were fun and full of lively discussion about everything. If we could, let's go ahead and start with sharing feedback from each of the three groups about each question. I'm going to take some notes, which I can actually screen share as I do it, and take about maybe, since we have some time, 3 minutes, no more than 5 per group to share out. And whoever your spokesperson is, somebody can go ahead and hop on and share first.
Hi, this is Melissa Reese. I was in Breakout Group 1. And regard to the start date, we were in support of teachers starting on the 11th, but pushing the start date to the 31st, just with the rising numbers, and it gives us more time to solidify our plan, but to also have teachers have more time to prepare for this new style of teaching. We were in support of either the AB or the AABB model for this schedule, with maybe a day built in for planning, and just that those days would be consistent so that families could plan. We were in favor of teachers being tested, but also looking in for a way for students to be tested as well, because COVID in the classroom is COVID in the classroom, no matter who has it. That we need some sort of minimum requirement for PPE at all time, and we understand that might look different at the high school versus at the elementary level, and that if we can find some medical evidence to support face shields, we would be in favor of face shields, and that there is some concern about our older teacher workforce, and them might decide to not come back as we get closer to school with what's going on with their numbers, and that as we start to put together more of a plan, that we need to over communicate and be transparent about what our plan is, even if there's things that are unknown, communicating what we do know in various forms, so that way the message is getting out, just like we're doing with the ads that are running on the radio, you know, about being safe and slowing the spread. So just kind of getting our message out about what we're going to be doing. And if I forgot anything from Breakout Group 1, please tag in.
That was great, Melissa. Thank you so much. Anybody else from Breakout Group 1 that wants to tag in on anything Melissa shared?
No, I believe Melissa covered exactly everything that was discussed.
Excellent. Wonderful. Let's go to Breakout Group 2.
So Breakout Group 2, I misunderstood the directions, and so we mainly just talked about question number 2. But we agreed that we think that for teachers and staff, faculty and staff, that getting tested should be mandatory. Of course, we had our great nursing expert in our group, so that was wonderful. We talked about, you all have already discussed doing it the last 2 weeks of July. Our group felt like doing that testing will put teachers and parents at ease. We did want to get some legal advice about making sure we can legally test everyone. I know all the adults, I know other places have done that. It also sounds like there's already some discussion about setting up our school nurses to be able to do nasal swabs. So like during the year, if somebody has symptoms or has been exposed, perhaps they could do the testing there. We also had a question about, we need some clarity about HIPAA. Do staff, adults have to report their positive results? I know we have to keep that confidential. We're not saying who's positive when you're doing your contact tracing, but you know, how do you handle it if somebody's positive and they're not telling you? So what are the HIPAA laws on that? And we agreed, we had a question about, you know, what about new teachers who don't have any leave? And Bill let us know that based on the federal law, people would have the 14 days. And we agreed everybody should be wearing masks, but we didn't get into school start dates. I apologize on that one.
No problem at all. That is great. Thank you so much. Anyone else from Breakout Group 2 that would want to?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to add on something from Melissa's comment as well. Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Bramble, and I'm a 5th grade teacher. And firstly, I know there's so many moving parts to making a final restart decision, and I, for one, am grateful I'm not the one that has to officially make them. But I do just want to provide a possible new perspective on just how much our district decisions about going back is impacting families and businesses, and how important the communication is, and even over communicating. I secured a daycare back in January for my new baby girl, and I was just notified that the daycare has now had to take all of the people that secured a spot and put them on a wait list, because without knowing the district schedule, they do not know how many of their children who would usually attend public school will be able to, thus limiting their building move up of kiddos. So while we talk about our decisions impacting students and families, and we are still impacting families who don't even have school-aged children. And even once the district announces their plan, childcare businesses still need to allow time for families to make decisions. And for people like me who are on a list, now have to wait for families ahead of them to make the decisions. So from my understanding, the board will be voting on school reopening on July 20th. However, I would imagine this would not be the date that families would be notified if their children would be attending full-time or part-time, or what that part-time schedule would actually be. CCSD has an amazing communications platform, and I was wondering if it would be possible to really advertise these dates that would allow for publicizing decisions such as the July 20th vote. I really think that sharing the dates would help calm some of the anxieties of families and assist in childcare planning.
Can I give Amy an amen?
Thank you so much for that. Absolutely. Anyone else from Breakout Group 2?
Maggie, I was going to just mention, I'm leading into Group 3, and I apologize because I also did not follow directions. I thought I was assigned the COVID testing and PPE question, and that's all we did in Group 3 as well. So
All good.
I apologize as I turn it over to our spokesperson, Ms. McIntosh.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Mev McIntosh. I'm at North Charleston High School. And in Breakout 3, as Jeff said, we did discuss more of the COVID testing, PPE. So we didn't get a chance to get to the what were our thoughts on the AB rotation, nor did we get a chance to discuss the school start date. But what we did say as a group was this, in terms of the COVID testing, that teachers seemed mostly supportive of it. And I know Jeff did mention that in the summertime, there was some pushback from parents when the school district tried to make the testing mandatory for athletes. In our conversations, another issue that came up too regarding the COVID testing, and Meg did a great job of sharing this with us, that she suggested that it should be mandatory for all stakeholders, not just faculty and staff. Because again, while the faculty and staff may be COVID-free, we may not have all the details and all the data on our student population. So what she recommended there was, if it's going to be optional for our students, to really frame the purpose and the reasoning behind it in a way that helps all stakeholders understand that it's for protective purposes and for precautionary purposes. We did a quick poll in our breakout group, and the majority did agree that mask wearing is necessary because, as Jeff explained to us, we are going to face challenges with 6-foot distancing in a number of our schools simply because of space. Jeff also mentioned that testing for faculty would be free. And the question was, again, do we make that mandatory or optional? I hope I covered everything. One more thing that we also wanted to include too is because as teachers, we know that it's difficult enough for our kids to wear their IDs around their necks consistently, much less adding on a mask to wear because of safety purposes. So one thing that Meg suggested was to revisit maybe some of the consequences in the PDP specific to mask wearing, because if our students are going to return face-to-face, then we have to have these safety expectations up front and hold them and their families accountable to it. So if I left anything out for Breakout 3, please join us at this time. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you so much. Before we move away from this, since a couple of our groups didn't go beyond question 2 in their initial discussion, does anybody want to just very briefly in the next 3 minutes or so share their thoughts on question 1 regarding school start date, or question 3, the hybrid schedule?
Maggie, I would like to add a clarifying question, and I know that Dr. Williams and I got cut off in the breakout when he was answering this for me. I know that when we met earlier this week in the AB rotation options, there was also one day that would be slated for PD/teacher planning. Has that now gone away, and then that additional day will be used as part of the AB rotation, or will that planning/PD still be included through September as originally discussed?
Yeah, I can answer that for you, Ms. McIntosh. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you. So the intent would be, and again, everything has to go through board approval, and we're waiting for the feedback from this group and the teacher group and the principal group to finalize any plans. But the idea would be we would probably, ideally, we would ask to ease in. So having that Wednesday day be planning for a couple of days, couple of weeks, and then move towards an AAA or BBB. You get the idea, sort of using of Wednesday. I think the key thing here is that there's 3 things that really matter, right, for student learning. You, as the quality of a teacher, the quality of the principal, and instructional time. So to give up a full day a week of instructional time makes my stomach cramp. And I think we want to make sure that we are providing enough support for teachers and how to do all this work really well. But we also want to make sure that we're maximizing that time, because we already know it's not ideal on how much time the teacher has face-to-face with kids.
Thank you.
And yes, this is Darby, if I'm permitted to speak.
Yes, sir.
Yes, in terms of the hybrid, and of course, North Charleston High School, we are going to fall in line like everyone else. But my administrative team and I, we came up with an alternative model. And I'll be succinct in this. We came up with the model that we would have 4 days per week, with half of the students attending class in the morning, and then engages in distant learning, independent study in the afternoon, while the other half of the student body engages in distant learning and study in the mornings before attending. On Fridays, a student will be engaged in distant learning, independent study at home, and so forth. Some of the many advantages of the model that we came up with 700 kids, approximately 350 in the morning, 350 in the afternoon. And some of the advantages would be there'll be fewer students in school, which would result in a greater safety. And number two, as asked by the superintendent, 100% of our students will be attending daily. Another advantage will be that they will be fed daily, as the need was seen during the summer school. And if we were to use Fridays as a day of virtual learning, the cleaning staff will be able to clean the entire building at that time. Also on Fridays, if we go to the 5-day as opposed to the 4-day, we can allow our students and parents to practice their virtual learning as well. In addition to that, it'd be advantageous for our MTSS to execute their program in terms of a daily basis. So that was just an alternative route if the virus were to get worse and if we can't go the 5 days 100%. It's just an alternative.
Thank you.
I have a question. I know when we spoke back in June, we talked about those students who are below the 20th percentile coming to school every day. We also spoke about kindergarten through second grade students reporting every day. Was that plan going to change now, or will that still remain the same?
If I could answer, I think it varies very much about the capacity of the building, ma'am. So as we said, our goal is to have as many kids that we can have safely back in school, but not every building will allow us to accommodate. But most buildings will allow more than 50%, if that makes sense. So we don't have to have half the kids in, half the kids out. And given that we're going to have some stable students, if we have to, again, move to the hybrid, but we all know that may be a possibility given the current virus level. And if we go to that hybrid, that stable group, we would prioritize students who have learning needs, who have special education needs, who maybe are a risk for retention in early childhood, so K to 2. So know that that's our intent, but it would have to vary building to building. And as Dr. Postlewaite said at the top of the call, some schools, like Jamie's on this call, are able to accommodate 100% of their students, at least physically within the building, safely.
So our teams for the next couple weeks will be meeting with each principal to determine their building capacity under proper physical distancing or barrier situations once MUSC has made sure that what we're proposing is safe. And then the capacity for that specific building will determine the operating mode for that specific building. But we do think that in the majority of our buildings, we can get more than 50% of the students present. So if a building holds 65% of the student body, 65% is what we'll be serving every day. So 15 of those, 15% would be coming every single day. The other 50% would be alternating. And as you can imagine, that's massively complex, but we are committed to having school face-to-face as long as it's safe to do so for as many children as possible with the priorities that Carolyn has explained. Do we have time for any more questions, Maggie, or are we winding down?
I think we're about winding down. If anyone maybe in the next minute has anything else to impart about school start date, I can jot that down, and otherwise we can kind of go into our final portion of the meeting.
I have
This is
a question, and maybe this has already been answered. If teachers are coming back the original date and students are pushed back 2 dates, we'd come back for our 5 workday PD days, and then we'd take the next 2 weeks. We would not be working the following 2 weeks until students begin. Am I reading that right? Because otherwise we'd increase our contract days.
That's correct. There's also the possibility that the teacher roundtable may want to meet with district calendar coordinators and look at reorganizing some of the professional development or work days that you had scheduled in the remainder of the year and make some trade-offs. But as you've described it, that's what is technically correct at this time. But it would allow us to get the teacher payroll started back, rolling again.
Yeah, and information about Canvas and other curricular changes, and then 2 weeks to marinate on it.
Exactly. So some teachers may have personal things they need to do those 2 weeks. A lot will be fiddling around with Canvas and the new tools and use that as additional preparation time, but that's not required. That's just, we know teachers and we thought they would appreciate the opportunity to receive all the information starting the 11th. Thank you for the question.
I think that's it. Or who else was?
This is Paul Asper. I just had one more question or comment, and it kind of goes back to this. What are the metric or metrics that the district and schools will be looking at in terms of both determining initially whether to open fully or not at all, or in a hybrid fashion at the district or school level, and then kind of what we'll be watching throughout the year to make those determinations in real time. We've talked about, I heard the term mentioned a couple of times that we'd want to see a downward trend in the rates before we would reopen, and I guess I would just, whether we answer that now or whether that's something that the team has clarity about, I think it would be helpful to have real clarity about what we're looking at to make those determinations. Is it like seeing the CDC's definition of 14-day downward trend? Is it something that's tied to the local warning systems that Dr. O'Brien mentioned? What are we, very specifically, what are we looking at to make those determinations? And then two, back to the good Dr. Bramble's point, which I just want to underline, emphasize, exclamation point, in the spirit of over communicating with parents and community members, talking to people about what are those metrics that the district's going to be looking at, often, regularly, transparently as we go.
Thank you for that. I can tell you that I can speak to this generally, but promise more specifics. We are working with MUSC on developing the indicators. The indicators will, we think, be based on the very detailed metrics and data analyses that MUSC has put in place. Their analytics are really impressive. We're working with Dr. Sweat on the university side of MUSC. We talked with him this week about designating a full-time person. MUSC doesn't have bandwidth to do that right now, but if the district were to use some of our CARES Act funding to fund a position to work full-time with MUSC, once those indicators are developed, to keep them updated and posted regularly so that everyone can see. And our preliminary thoughts are about creating some sort of dashboard that would be on the district website, but that will be broken down in some aspects school by school, because our different areas of the district will definitely be impacted in different ways. So that's where we are. We are waiting now to hear back from MUSC. We had a message from Dr. Sweat yesterday that he had discussed this with Pat Colley and a couple of other colleagues. they definitely want to help us. We simply have to figure out how to create the capacity with the right kind of expertise for them to do that. So if you know of someone with that particular skill set who has a foot in both worlds, understands the data and analytics, and also understands a bit about education and can translate into the language and around indicators that make sense for us, that's where we are on that. But we definitely need those metrics in place and transparent before we would actually engage teachers and students in schools. Does that address the question clearly enough, Mr. Asper?
Yeah, thank you for that. And just want to say thank you for all that y'all are doing and all the educators and staff are doing. I know this is a Herculean task, so thank you all.
It is. And I should have also mentioned DHEC in that previous answer. You know, DHEC has their high, medium, low rating system. We simply wanted something that was more, a little more precise for the decisions we have to make by zip code in various communities. So thank you. I think we're probably at the time, unless someone else wanted to comment on the start date.
Maggie, yes, Dr. Postaway, I would like to request, since most of our breakout groups did not directly discuss the start date, whether to push it back or to start on the original date of August 18th, would it be possible, Maggie, and would it be okay with the group of stakeholders here if we just did a quick poll to see how many of us would prefer the 18th start date over the delayed start date?
Maggie, are you?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't find my unmute. Let me stop sharing my screen so I can see. Sometimes we have the polling feature available, but I don't see it, but we could use the reaction feature for it instead and just do a thumbs up under reaction for the 18th. Or let's do just a thumbs up for the delayed to the 31st, and then we'll go from there. So if you're in favor of delaying for the 31st, go ahead and put your thumbs up under your reactions button. Okay, so I've seen about 13 or so thumbs up on that, give or take. 15, I'll call it 15. Now, conversely, let's put thumbs up for keeping the date as is. So I see about 6. So it seems to be that the majority of the group that participated in voting would be in favor of the delayed start. And I assume that would be along the guidelines of what Meg was explaining, with staff perhaps still returning on the 11th for the 5 days of PD and then taking 2 weeks to marinate and then invite students into the fold.
Excuse me, Dr. Postaway, Darby speaking, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
In terms of those students who, in terms of virtual learning and whatnot, has anyone thought about contacting ETV to assist, since most of our kids would have TVs, in terms of virtual learning?
Yes, sir. We're on it.
Okay, all right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. And ETV reached out to us to give credit where credit is due.
Wow, thank you. Okay, ma'am.
Yes, sir. All right, then if there are any burning, if there's any burning desire to continue the discussion or make one final point on the major discussion questions, you need to do so now, and if not, we're going to move on. All right, educators on the call, I know that wasn't adequate wait time, but for this sort of Zoom meeting, I'm going to call it enough wait time and move on then, just to indicate that we'll send you a copy of today's slide deck. It will have the links in it to the American Academy of Pediatrics report. It will also have Erica Taylor's email address if you have suggestions, ideas, questions that you didn't think of today. And a reminder that our next meeting will be July 24th. We will take recommendations to the board based on the feedback that we've received from you, from the Teachers Roundtable group, from our support staff members who are working on a multitude of internal working groups. And then when we confer on the 24th, we'll discuss what the board has approved, what we know to be the case, and talk about the things that relate to conditions as we know them at that time. We're all going to have to stay very nimble and flexible. The district will have 3 operating modes in place, and we hope we'll be able to pivot smoothly among them. Our default position is that 100% of the children return in every building where we can safely do that. The fallback position is that we go to some sort of A-B schedule in areas where we cannot bring back all the students, or if health conditions, if medical experts recommend fewer than 100% of the students in a building. And then our least desirable position is that all of our students would be learning virtually. But if that happens, we are much better prepared, as Carolyn Belcher explained, to deal with that this year. So that's where we are. Our recommendations will go to the board on the 20th. We will send you a copy of them before the meeting on the 20th so that you will know what they are when we release them to the board. And then we'll confer again on the 24th to see whether we have any final decisions to make, or whether we need additional times to stay in touch throughout the year. We heard you loudly and clearly about communication. So the majority of our communications team is on this call, and we'll take that to heart, I'm sure. Did anyone else want to say anything before we close out this morning's meeting?
I have a quick question. Just because I work at a much smaller school, I've been seeing 2 different things about nurses at every school, that there will be one at every school versus there'll be a nurse for every 600 kids. And if our school doesn't have the magic number for nursing allocation, how will that look this year?
If your school has fewer than 600 students, Jeff, go ahead. That's your area. Sorry.
It's very simple. There'll be a minimum of 1 nurse per school. So no matter how small a school is, they will have a full-time nurse. And Ellen's all over that. There's Ellen. And Don's going to give me the money.
Right, the Chief Financial Administrative Officer listens into these meetings. He rarely speaks, but he is like Dagwood Bumstead with the numbers just rolling around in his head the whole time we are talking about the things we simply must do. We simply have to do them in order to bring children back. So we are committed to a safe school restart. Our children need to be back at school. Our teachers can't wait to be able to interface with children again. But we owe the adults in the school as well as the children our commitment to do everything we can to keep everyone safe based on the advice of our local medical experts, along with reports from those at the state and national level. So thank you again for the time you've given us. We certainly appreciate it. And
Dr. Postlewaite.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Reverend Mack.
That's all right. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that participated in this task force meeting. And prior to our meeting on July 20th, if there are any questions or concerns or any additional information that this group may want to share with us prior to our meeting on the 20th, would be greatly appreciated. Thank you to MUSC, DHEC, Chamber of Commerce, teachers, parents, just community at large in this type of engagement, because truly it is important for us to better understand the best way of moving forward and being able to safely move into the learning curve once again in a new norm. And this is a task that some of us have, or many of us have not faced before. But the decisions that are being made is not just solely being rested upon staff, but it's important how parents feel and how teachers feel and how the community at large feels about how we get this restart moving forward. And without a doubt, I believe everyone on this call totally agree that we need to educate our kids and to the best method possible and safely as well in accomplishing that task so that we continue to move forward. So we can't stress it enough, and I believe, in speaking on behalf of the board, how important this task force has been in trying to help us to make timely and sound decision that's in the best interests of everyone. So again, I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Mack. Mrs. Darby, did you want to make any closing comments? If she does, she's on mute. So.
She's still on mute.
Are you on mute?
Now I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I just echo what Reverend Mack says. Y'all are just amazing. So thank you very much, everybody here, for putting in the time that you are to make a safe restart for all of our students and teachers. So thank you.
Thanks again, everyone, and we will send out our recommendations to you prior to the July 24th meeting. We'll see you again.